We will understand the collusive and non-collusive models in this module. Let us begin by understanding what is oligopoly. An oligopoly is an industry characterized by few dominant firms. Oligopoly is said to prevail when there are few firms in the market producing or selling a product. Oligopoly is also referred as the competition among the few. A special case of oligopoly is duopoly, where two firms are competing with each other. Under oligopoly, each firm has enough market power to prevent itself from being a price taker, but each firm is facing inter-firm rivalry, which is preventing it to consider the market demand curve as its own demand curve. Competition among the oligopolistic firms is so severe, those economists call it as a cutthroat competition. Examples of oligopolistic industries include computer, soft drinks, steel, aluminium, etc. The oligopolistic market structure is different from perfect competition, monopoly and monopolistic competition, monopoly and monopolistic competition in terms of strategic behavior. The behavior of oligopolistic firm is strategic because it takes into account the impact of its decision on other competing firms and their reactions in response to its decision. On the other hand, firms in the perfect competition and monopolistic competition have non-strategic behavior because before taking their price and output decision, they do not consider any possible reaction from their competitors. The behavior of monopolist is also non-strategic, as monopolist has no competitor to compete with. In some oligopolistic market, some or all the firms are earning substantial profits in the long run because entry of barrier making it too impossible for a new firm to enter the market.
After studying this module, you shall be able to know the concept of oligopoly, understand the collusive models, know the concept of cartel, know the concept of Cournot, Stackelberg, Bertrand price leadership firm, distinguish between collusive and non-collusive models. Let us begin by understanding the models of oligopoly. Economists have developed a large number of models by taking the different assumptions regarding the behavior of the oligopolistic firms, that is, whether they would cooperate or compete with each other, regarding the objective they seek to achieve, that is, whether they seek to maximize profit, joint profit, sales, etc., and regarding the different reaction patterns of the rival firms to price and output changes by one firm. There are two types of models advanced by the economist are as follows: collusive models and non-collusive models. Under collusive models, we have cartel, which involves profit sharing and market sharing, and price leadership. Under non-collusive models, we have Cournot model, Stackelberg model, Bertrand model, Sweezy model or Kinked demand curve. Let us understand what is cartel. Cartel is an organization created from a formal agreement between groups of producers of a good or service to regulate the supply in an effort to regulate prices. Under cartel, producers or countries act together as a single producer and by controlling the production and marketing influencing the prices. The cartel is successful in creating an oligopoly, though cartel has market power but not as like in the monopoly. OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, was set up in 1973. The behavior of OPEC provides an example of cartelization of an industry that contained a large number of competitive firms, most of which were price takers. Before 1973, the oil industry was not perfectly competitive. There were several oil producing countries, so no country by withholding his output in the market influences the prices. But OPEC attracted attention in 1973 when its members voluntarily agreed to restrict their outputs by negotiating quotas for the first time. During 1973, OPEC countries accounted for about 70% of the world oil exports. As a result of this output restriction, OPEC countries succeed in raising prices of oil in the world market. OPEC exports were about 31 million barrels per day in 1973, and in order to raise the prices from $3.37 per barrel to an average of $11.25 a barrel, exports had only to be restricted to 28.5 million barrels per day. So, a reduction in OPEC's export of less than 10% was sufficient to more than triple the world price. The higher prices were maintained for the remainder of the decade, and as a result, there is a tremendous increase in the wealth of the OPEC countries. OPEC's policy was successful because of the several reasons. First reason is that the member countries of the OPEC provided a large proportion of the total world supply, that is, nearly 70% of the world's supply of crude oil. The next reason is that the non OPEC countries were not able to increase their supplies in response to the price increase. The last reason is that the world demand for crude oil was relatively inelastic in the short run. How OPEC was successful in restricting output and influencing prices is shown in the figure. Price is measured on y-axis and quantity on x-axis. SW is the world supply curve. SN is the non-OPEC supply curve of oil. S-W is also the world supply curve after the fixation of production by OPEC. PW is the world price and DT is the world's demand curve for oil. When the OPEC countries were prepared to supply all that was demanded at the world price PW, the world supply curve was SW. The world supply cuts the world's demand curve for oil DD at point E. At price PW, the total quantity of oil produced is OQ, out of which OQ1 was produced by non-OPEC countries and Q1Q, that is OQ minus OQ1, by the OPEC. Now, suppose OPEC, by fixing its production quota, OPEC shifted the world supply curve to S-W, and the horizontal difference between Sn and S-W shows the production by OPEC. Now, the new world supply curve S-W intersects the demand curve DD at E1. The new world higher price is now P-W. At price P-W, the total quantity of oil produced is OQ2, out of which OQ3 is produced by non-OPEC and Q3Q2, that is OQ2 minus OQ3, by the OPEC. As a result, with higher prices, OPEC increased its oil revenues. Though there was decline in the sale by the OPEC countries, but price rises more than a fall in sales. Non-OPEC countries also gain because they were also selling at new higher world price. Next, let's move on to the price leadership. Price leadership is an important form of collusive oligopoly. Under price leadership, the leader firm sets the price and the other firms follow it. The price leader firm has major share of total sales and a group of smaller firms supply the remainder of the market. The large firm acts as a dominant firm which sets a price that maximizes his own profit. The other firms have no option but to take the price set by the dominant firm as given and maximize their profits accordingly. These other firms have very small share of total sales, so individually other firms would have very little influence over the price. Thus, other firms act as a perfect competitors and take the price decided by the dominant firm as given.
Now, let us take the case of dominant firm and see how it sets the price to maximize its profit with the help of a diagram. When leader firm maximizes its profit, it takes into account how the output of the other firms depend on the price it sets. It is shown in the figure. In the figure, price is measured on y-axis and quantity on x-axis. D is the market demand curve, which is negatively sloped. SS is the supply curve, which is the aggregate marginal cost curve of the follower firms. DT is the demand curve of the dominant firm. The demand curve of the dominant firm is the difference between market demand and the supply curve of the follower firm. At price OP1, the market demand is equal to the supply by the follower's firm, so that the dominant firm can sell nothing at this price. At price OP2 or less, the follower firm will not supply any good. So, at price OP2 or less, the dominant firm faces the demand curve D, and prices between OP2 and OP1, the dominant firm faces the demand curve DD. Corresponding to the demand curve DD faced by the dominant firm, the dominant firm is facing marginal revenue MRD. MCD is the marginal cost faced by the dominant firm. The dominant firm, in order to maximize profit, should produce a level of output where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. The dominant firm is maximizing profit at point E, where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. The equilibrium price is OP star and the equilibrium quantity produced by the dominant firm is OQD. At this price, follower firms sell a quantity OQS. The total quantity that is sold at price OP dash or OP star is OQT, which is the sum of the quantity produced by the dominant firms OQD and the quantity produced by the small firms OQS.
Further, we will now discuss non-collusive models. Augustin Cournot, a French economist, published his theory of duopoly in 1938. We begin with a simple model of duopoly where two firms are competing with each other. It is assumed that the products produced by the two firms are homogeneous and they are aware of the market demand curve. The market demand curve is assumed to be linear, that is, straight line. Each firm need to decide how much to produce and two firms are taking their decisions at the same time. It is also assumed that cost of production is taken as zero. It is only the demand side that is considered. It is also assumed that each firm believes that the rival firm will keep its output constant regardless of its action and their effect upon the market price of the product. In other words, each firm treats the output level of its competitors as fixed and then decides how much to produce.
We shall now understand the Cournot duopoly model graphically. In figure, price is measured on x-axis and quantity on the y-axis. We are taking a special case of duopoly where two firms are competing with each other. The demand curve faced by the two rival firms is the straight line DD1. The total output that both firms produce is OA plus AD1 is equals to OD1. The maximum output produced by firm A is OA and by firm 2 is AD1. When the total output OD1 is offered for sale in the market, then the market price is 0. We are assuming that there is no cost of production. Let us suppose that firm 1 starts the business first and then followed by firm 2. Firm 1 would behave like a monopolist as he is starting first. Firm 1 will produce maximum output OA to maximize profit. The price is OP that is charged by firm 1 to produce OA units of output. Firm 1 is facing no cost of production, so its entire revenue would be its profits. The profit that is earned by firm 1 by producing OA units of output is OAEP. Now, suppose firm 2 also enters the market and starts operating his business. Firm 2 knows that firm 1 is already operating in the market and producing OA units of output. Firm 2 believes that firm 1 will continue to produce OA units of output irrespective of what output he decides to produce. So, the firm 2 can take ED1 portion of the demand curve and produce half of AD1 units of output. Firm 2 is now producing AB units of output. The total output that is produced by firm 1 and firm 2 is OA plus AB is equals to OB. The new price would be OP1, which is less than the price that is charged by firm 1 when he is the only firm that is operating in the market. The total profits earned by both firms are OBCP1. This profit OBCP1 that is earned by both firms is less than OAEP. Out of OBCP1, total profits earned by firm 1 are OAFP1 and profits earned by firm 2 is AFCB. The profit earned by firm 1 is reduced from OAEP to OAFP1 as firm 2 is producing AB units of output. Now, firm 1 assumes that firm 2 will continue to produce AB units of output. The best that firm 1 can do is to produce half of OD1 minus AB. Now that firm 2 has been surprised by the reduction of output produced by firm 1 and his reduced share of profits in comparison to firm 1, he will reappraise his situation. This process of adjustment and readjustment by each producer will continue, firm 1 being forced gradually to reduce his output and firm 2 being able to increase his output gradually until each is producing the same amount of output equal to the 1/3 of OD1 units of output. Throughout this process, each firm assumes that the other firm will keep its output constant irrespective of what he decided to produce.
Moving on to the Stackelberg model. The Stackelberg model is named after the German economist Heinrich Ferrer von Stackelberg, who published Market Structure and Equilibrium in 1934, which described the model. The Stackelberg leadership model is a strategic game in economics in which the firm moves first and then the follower firms move sequentially. In this model, suppose firm 1 sets its output first and then followed by firm 2 after observing firm 1's output makes its output decision. Firm 1 before setting output must consider how firm 2 will react. The Stackelberg model is different from Cournot model where neither firm has any opportunity to react. The Stackelberg and Cournot models are similar because in both the models, competition is based on quantity. However, the first move gives the leader in Stackelberg a crucial advantage. The very important assumption in the Stackelberg model is perfect information. The follower must observe the quantity chosen by the leader, otherwise, the model would reduce to Cournot. The aggregate Stackelberg output and consumer surplus is greater than the aggregate Cournot output, and the Stackelberg price is lower than the Cournot price. We shall now understand Stackelberg model graphically. In the figure, BR1 and BR2 are the best response curves. The Frohn-shaped curves are from one isoprofit. Point N is the Nash equilibrium where two reaction curves intersect each other. The Stackelberg equilibrium point is S, the point at which the highest isoprofit for firm 1 is reached on firm 2's best response function. At point S, firm 1's isoprofit is tangent to firm 2's best response function. If firm 1 cannot commit to its output, then the output function unravels following the arrow from S back to the C. Further, we will discuss the Bertrand model. The Bertrand model was formulated in 1883 by Bertrand in a review of Antoine Augustin Cournot's 1838 book in which Cournot had put forward the Cournot model. According to Cournot, firms compete with each other and choose the quantities. The equilibrium outcome would result in the prices which are more than marginal cost. According to Bertrand, if firms choose prices rather than the quantities, then the competitive outcome would occur with the price equal to the marginal cost. The Bertrand model assumes that products produced by firms are homogeneous. Suppose that two duopoly firms are competition by simultaneously choosing a price instead of the quantities. We know that the products produced by firms are homogeneous, then the consumer will only purchase from the lowest price seller. If the two firms charge different prices, the lower price firm will supply the entire market and higher price firm will sell nothing. The entire market is covered by the lowest price seller. If both firms charge the same price, then the consumers would be indifferent as to which firm they buy from. In this case, we may assume that each firm would supply the market equally. The Nash equilibrium is the competitive output because of the incentive to cut the prices. Moving on to the Kinked model. The two seminal papers on King demand were written nearly simultaneously in 1939 on both sides of the Atlantic. Paul Sweezy of Harvard College published the demand under conditions of oligopoly. According to Sweezy, an ordinary demand curve does not apply to oligopoly markets and promotes a Kinked demand curve. The price rigidity is the basis of the Kinked demand curve model of oligopoly. Let us understand the case of Kinked-Sweezy model with the help of a diagram. According to Sweezy, each firm faces a demand curve kinked at the currently prevailing price, say P star. Any price above or below P star, the demand curve is elastic or inelastic. It implies that if the firm raises its price above P star, other firms would not follow him and as a result, it would lose sales and market share. On the other hand, if the firm lowers its price below P star, other firms would follow him, else they would lose the market share. Thus, an ordinary demand curve does not apply to oligopoly markets and promotes a Kinked demand curve.
Let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. An oligopoly is an industry characterized by few dominant firms. Oligopoly is said to prevail when there are few firms in the market producing or selling a product. Oligopoly is also referred to as the competition among the few. A special case of oligopoly is duopoly, where two firms are competing with each other. Under oligopoly, each firm has enough market power to prevent itself from being a price taker, but each firm is facing inter-firm rivalry which is preventing it to consider the market demand curve as its own demand curve. Competition among the oligopolistic firms is so severe that the economist has called it as a cutthroat competition. Economists have developed a large number of models by taking different assumptions regarding the behavior of the oligopolistic firms, that is, whether they would cooperate or compete with each other, regarding the objective they seek to achieve, that is, the profit, sales, and whether they want to maximize them or not, and regarding the different reaction patterns of the rival firms to price and output changes by one firm. The collusive models are cartel, profit sharing and market sharing, and price leadership. On the other hand, the non-collusive models are Cournot model, Stackelberg model, Bertrand model, and Kinked model. In collusive oligopoly, cartel is an organization created from a formal agreement between groups of producers of a good or service to regulate the supply in an effort to regulate the prices. Under cartel, producers or countries act together as a single producer and by controlling production and marketing influencing the prices. Whereas in the non-collusive models, firms are competing with each other by choosing prices, quantities, etc.